SRAM Mavens are one of the most powerful mountain bike brakes you can buy today. I've been running them for the past 4 months on 203mm rotors with pretty much zero issues. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Well, today we're going to fix it anyway by bolting on some chunky 220mm rotors. Is this going to be a match made in heaven, or have I gone mad with power? Let's find out. Bigger brake rotors aren't really something that I've experimented with before. My first proper mountain bike came with 180 in the back, 203 in the front, and that worked great. So because of that, I've generally sort of floated around 180 to 203 the whole time that I've been riding mountain bikes. It's only since riding somewhere with bigger, steeper hills, some people might call these mountains, that I've felt the limits of what smaller rotors can offer. Back in October, when I initially fitted these SRAM Maven base brakes, I also fitted a new set of 203mm rotors front and rear, and they had been working pretty much perfectly the whole time I've been riding these brakes. However, when I started taking on steeper trails with over 500 meters of vertical drop, I could start to feel the brakes fading ever so slightly due to the buildup of heat in the caliper and disc. Now this fade wasn't dramatic at all, the brakes still felt nice and strong, but the feel of them did change over the course of the descent. Because of that, and because generally I quite enjoy messing around with my bike setup, we find ourselves here with 220mm rotors front and rear and SRAM Maven brakes. These rotors and adapters were kindly supplied by Outspoken Cycles. These are their GPVN rotors, which stands for good price, very nice. And they are indeed a good rotor at a nice price. This 220mm size comes in at 2mm thick, and if you want to get yourself a set, I will put a link down below. Before we get into the meat of the video, I just want to say a big thank you to Outspoken Cycles for supporting the channel. They are actually one of the first brands that came on board and showed this channel some support, and it is massively appreciated. So, thank you to them, and now let's talk about some brake rotors. So perhaps the best way of explaining the pros and cons of bigger brake rotors is with an Allen key. Now bear with me here, but if you try tightening up a bolt holding the short end of an Allen key, you're going to have to use a huge amount of force in your hand to get it to the required level of tightness. Try tightening that same bolt while holding the long end of an Allen key, and you're going to have to use a lot less force from your hand to get it to the same level of tightness. Holding the short end, that represents riding with smaller rotors. Holding the long end, that represents riding with bigger rotors. So that should just mean that bigger rotors are better. Well, not quite. Braking on a mountain bike isn't simply a binary affair, and while overall power is very important, it's also pretty important that you can modulate the power that you have available. Larger rotors can make it harder to modulate the available power, and to explain why, I'm going to go back to my bolt and tool analogy. Imagine you had to tighten up a very, very small, very delicate bolt with a very low torque setting, but the only tool you had available to do it was an enormous breaker bar. You will be able to get that bolt to the required tightness and the correct torque setting, but it's going to take a lot more care and precision than if you had a more reasonably sized tool. It's not a perfect analogy, but that's basically why it can be more difficult to modulate your brakes with larger rotors. As a quick aside, some people might say that smaller or larger rotors offer more or less modulation, and that is fundamentally untrue. No rotor size actually has more or less modulation, it's just that smaller rotors make it easier for the rider to access that modulation, and larger rotors are going to require a little bit more precision when it comes to your braking inputs. A final benefit of bigger discs, and actually the main reason I wanted to try them out on my bike, is their ability to better manage heat. This one is less tricky to explain, as a larger disc will have a greater surface area and a greater mass, and therefore it can more easily absorb and dissipate heat, which should mean it's not going to overheat as easily. All things considered, it sounds like bigger rotors should be a little bit of a no-brainer for most gravity-focused riders, but combine them with a brake system that is already very powerful, and you might have something that is simply overkill for most riders, given the overall system weight of a normal sized rider and a normal bike. With this in mind, I set out pretty cautiously when I started testing these rotors, as the last thing I wanted to do was grab a fistful of brake, go over the handlebars and tumble my way down a New Zealand mountainside. As you can probably tell, I've not fallen down any mountains, but getting used to these rotors definitely wasn't as simple as I was expecting. Riding this brake and rotor combo is a little bit like getting into a modern car after years of daily driving something old and clapped out. The brakes feel absurdly powerful at first, and getting your modulation and your controlled stops dialed in takes a little bit of time and effort. I thought I'd make things a little bit easier for myself by running organic pads rather than sintered, because generally I find organic pads a little bit easier to modulate, and I didn't think I'd need the additional power that sintered pads can offer. I ended up swapping back to the bog standard SRAM organic pads that these brakes came with, and to be honest, they've never felt more powerful. But I don't think that's down to the pads. My test trails for these rotors have mainly been around Wanaka and Queenstown in New Zealand, and I think most of the riding footage in this video is going to be from Bike Glendu, which is based just outside of Wanaka. I'm using this footage because I'm really happy with how it looks, but also because it's been really sunny here recently and all the light inside the forest has been super dappled, and my old clapped out GoPro just cannot seem to hack it. I'll put a quick bit of footage from some techie stuff here so you get an idea of what it looks like, but I'm using a Hero 10 for this footage and it just cannot seem to hack this kind of lighting situation. So if you guys have any action camera recommendations that can better handle more variable light conditions, please let me know about them down below. Anyway, back to the rotors. So I was a little bit scared using these brakes initially, as I found it really easy to lock up both the front and rear wheels, and I found myself having to really think about how I was using the brakes to get the most out of their performance. It was a little bit like learning how to brake properly again, and definitely required a recalibration of my riding mindset. I found myself over braking for sections because I wasn't used to using so little force on the lever to do so much stopping. Fortunately, I did have a moment where these rotors clicked for me, and it was when I was riding some steep and rough sequential turns. Because I was using such a small amount of force on the lever to slow myself down, it meant my arms and upper body had much more available strength to deal with the impacts and the shifts in weight required to ride the trail. It really was a eureka moment, and these rotors have been kind of revolutionary for my riding when I've been on steep, sustained sections of trail. They also really shine when you need to scrub off a big amount of speed in a hurry. If you've got to fully drop the anchors to slow down and set up for the next section of trail, it is very, very satisfying using this brake and rotor combo, and it does feel a little bit like hitting a wall of power. Another area where this rotor size really shines is when you're riding more exposed high alpine terrain. Not only do they offer a lot of braking power, they also offer a lot of confidence in your ability to stop, which is exactly what you want when you're riding beside a cliff. Where these rotors don't shine so much is in more delicate riding situations, like when you need to scrub off a little bit of speed so you don't overshoot a jump. I still find them a little bit hard to trust in this regard, and I've both overcooked it and undercooked it when using them in these kind of riding scenarios. On the plus side, when I've taken this brake setup down trails with more than 500 meters of vertical drop, I've had absolutely zero issues with brake fade like I had with the 203mm rotors. So in that regard, they've been nothing but a success. Even with the aroma of cooking brake pads in the air, the lever feel and power has remained absolutely consistent. At this point, I've been riding these rotors for 4 weeks now, and I already feel pretty comfortable with them. I think moving forward, I'm only going to get more used to how they affect the delivery of braking power, and hopefully the downsides will eventually disappear. So, can your brakes be too powerful? Yeah, kinda. If you ride somewhere with 100 meters to 200 meters of vertical drop on your descents, and those are your regular trails, there is absolutely no need for these rotors if you're running Maven brakes. Unless you're a heavier rider or you ride a very heavy e-bike, I can't see the heat build-up becoming enough of an issue that would sort of justify the downsides of these bigger rotors. If you regularly ride descents with more than 500 meters of vertical drop and you also have Mavens, then yes, this rotor size does have some benefits, but be warned, it's not without an additional learning curve or without its own set of compromises. A better use case for these rotors might be if you're running something like SRAM codes or Shimano 4-pots. Those brakes have slightly less power within the caliper and would definitely benefit from the additional mechanical advantage that larger rotors can offer. Back in the UK, I was slightly disappointed with the performance of my Shimano SLX 4-pots after a while, and I think these rotors probably would have solved a lot of problems for me. Perhaps the biggest sign that SRAM Mavens plus 220mm rotors isn't really the best idea is that many downhill World Cup riders on SRAM don't bother with rotors this big. If the fastest riders in the world don't need them, chances are I don't either. For now, I'm going to keep running these rotors as it's kind of fun having brakes that are this absurdly powerful, but I am also well aware that they are overkill for a lot of the trails that I ride. With all that said, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, why not like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.